Oh, we've got quite a few people on the screen. It would be helpful just to see who is on the screen, actually. Do you have a list?
It goes through.
Just go through the list, please.
So you currently have Amanda Holden, part of the Housing Land team, Aisha Bateman. You have Councillor Steve Evans, Jim Crawshaw, Hamish Coley, Ian Kelly, Joe Snell, Joe Malbury, Councillor Laura Rollins, Leo Pollack, Maria Bailey, Maria Dunn, Mark Clark, Bob Lamont, Robert McGrath, Sharon Howe, and Suzanne Ward.
Okay, so welcome. Do we have any apologies noted?
You do, Chair. You have apologies from Councillor Jane Francis and Councillor David A. Wright.
Okay, right. Declarations of interest. Any declaration? I can't imagine there are. No. Okay, I'll take it as none. I don't see no hands up. Chair's remarks. Well, first of all, thank you for accommodating me at 9:30. I have to go to London afterwards, and I want to get a reasonably early train. We need to get a reasonably early train if there's going to be any point of it. So we hummed and hawed whether we bring this meeting forward a bit or change the date. It's usually more problematic to change a date. So thank you to everybody for accommodating that, and just apologies for my voice. I've had issues. I think I've had the 100-day cough or whatever it's called, and various other things over the festive period. It was not a good time for me, so I'm hoping my voice will hold out, but just bear with me. So that's that. Right, minutes of the last meeting. Everybody okay with them?
Yes, sure.
Okay, everybody seems okay with them. So we come to the first substantive item, which is Homes for the Future. And we've been here before a couple of times. The draft came in 18th of October. I don't think we had any substantive comments back from members. It was launched as a draft on the 8th of December. In fact, that is the document there that we do. We launched Andy Street, launched it. It was a major, I think, very successful. There's just 3 points to note about this coming back, because these are important changes. One is the implementation has been phased and made a bit slower to reduce impact on existing pipeline, and frankly, with cost pressures the way they are everywhere, that's good. The financial implications therefore have been updated, and interestingly, the government has launched its consultation, broad in terms of options, but I mean, what we think, and that's what our engagement with the industry tells us, is that our phased introduction with more flexibility about how to achieve standards is better understood and accepted by the industry. So, John, can I ask who's going to lead on this item? You're probably going to start it.
It'll be Leo. Sorry, I'll just put my microphone on. Leo and Mia did most of the heavy lifting, writing the report. Leo is head of policy and has been very closely involved since the autumn. As you say, Ian, the launch was very successful on December the 8th, and thank you for your part in that, by the way, as well. It's now out for any final comments for industry, from industry players for the next sort of week, 10 days, I think, to go on that. There hasn't been very much back, and nothing from members of this committee. So I'm hoping that we can now do the formal bit and endorse this here, and it can then go to WMCA for the absolute final sign off. So Leo, do you want to say more about it, or Mia?
Yeah, if Mia wants to introduce it, and I'll chip in at the end with a little update on consultation responses and next steps.
Sure. Thanks, Leo. Yeah, so most of it's kind of been covered in terms of what has been updated since last time. So around the event, some sort of information has gone out around that. You will have seen some potentially some stuff on LinkedIn, and the documents have also been available for people to view on the CA website in their sort of proposal form. So that's both the strategy document and also the technical standard document. The consultation period for those is open till the 22nd of January. So that's the engagement where people have got the chance to just put forward any sort of final thoughts. So Leo's going to cover that engagement period in more detail. And then also, as mentioned, the government's consultation has come out. So there's some sort of considerations around that. The CA will be looking to kind of put its own feedback into that. So we'll be getting together with our task force to discuss what that might look like. There's some important facts to note in that, which are just around firstly the options. So there's a few options provided. The preferred option is what we're kind of going with as the assumption of what kind of might happen. But it's also important to note that there are other considerations in there around existing buildings, and there's also some focus on non-residential buildings as well, and naturally that's something that we don't cover, so just something worth sort of considering that's kind of come out of that we perhaps weren't necessarily expecting. So that's until the 6th of March. We've got time to respond to that. So yeah, we will be putting in a sort of CA response there. And then in terms of our own engagement, I'll pass over to Leo and let him pick that up.
Thanks, Mia. And thank you, Councillor Courts. I think you summarised many of the changes that have taken place since the last report. So that's one less thing for us. As Mia said, we have the consultation running until the 22nd. We've only had a handful of responses so far, mostly from brick manufacturers, it turns out, who have kind of queries around the pre-manufactured value content standard that's included. So we're sort of setting up a meeting with a couple of them and some other interested parties just to go through how traditional build methods will be still catered for in the 2030 standard. We've got the highest PMV percentage requirements, and how those kind of figures kind of land on both types of building method. So beyond that, we have our refreshed Future Homes Task Force, which is being split into two subgroups, one focused on development and delivery, so kind of some hard kind of industrial policy support, and another on the skills development end of this as well, and kind of refreshing that task force as we speak. So any kind of thoughts or comments on who should be involved with that, what its agenda should be? There's been a number of options that we're looking at, including potentially setting up a regional trade association for some of our local contractors. But interested for thoughts on that as well from the board, as well as Mia mentioned, the fact that the National Future Homes consultation that's running in parallel with ours covers non-residential construction as well. But yeah, I think we've got to a point where there was really strong support for our approach at the event in December, and yeah, we're hopefully on a track to adopt this and have this endorsed in the final couple of boards to come. So thanks, and interested for any questions. Okay,
I've got depending anyone putting their hands up. Actually, there is a hand up there, but okay, I'll come to you in a minute, Steve. Just a few comments of my own. A key thing we mustn't lose sight of with this exercise is the leadership role, because what we will find is that different organisations, companies, and whatever, we're likely to use different methods. That's what's so important and useful about the flexibility approach that we adopted here. I was with one a few weeks ago, and you know, in many ways most companies are fighting, but there's a bit of preciousness between companies about tech and stuff like that, so enabling people to do their own method is good. Second, I mean, we put a great deal of emphasis on cost in this, rightly so. Cost has a certain application in the, you know, if you own a site, it's going to cost more. But one of the key things about this is that in certain parts, and I accept this doesn't apply in many parts of the West Midlands, but when these things get baked into the system, it's reflected in land value. And effectively, when people bid for land, they know they've got to do a certain keep to certain standards. In the end, it will be reflected in land value in many cases. In certain cases, particularly where land is sort of lower land value, it won't. And that's going to be, and it would be quite a big land effect. So the knock on of that, of course, is our intervention. We need to be mindful of this. The intervention rates that are needed to remediate land, and that's a prime function of what we are here to do, is going to be more costly. So, I mean, that's where the cost really bites. But that is a really important thing. So I think we've done the right thing here. You know, we just need these things to be baked in as a standard in the industry, but using that flexibility. So well done to that approach. Can I be just picky? And this is more personal than anything else. You refer to me as leader of Solihull Council attending event. Of course, I'm a leader of Solihull Council, but that isn't the reason I'm doing it. It's quite an important distinction. This is I'm lead member for housing and land. That's the reason I'm here, and that's the reason I attend. And that is an important distinction because, you know, to be honest, Solihull has different dynamic in terms of land in most cases. So, but as it happens, I'm an ex-professional in this industry anyway. So anyway, that's just me being picky, but I have to point that out. That's my points. I had a hand from Steve Evans. Could I have your questions, comments, or whatever, please?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And I wouldn't want you to do anything detrimental to your 100-day cough, so I'll try and keep it short without you having to respond at length. And I wouldn't want to make you late for your meeting in London either. But more importantly, as you say, we've got to take a really balanced approach on this. And we know how tough it is out there in the construction industry. We know about the inflationary pressures that all organisations are facing when it comes to house building. And of course, as the former chair of the Environment Board, I'd absolutely agree with you that this is absolutely the right direction of travel. Of course, we want zero carbon housing, but I don't want to see any priority projects, for example, in Wolverhampton impacted. So yes, absolutely support the travel of direction, but I'd like us to just be mindful on a project by project basis. You know, I don't want to see anything impacted in what we're trying to do in Wolverhampton. We're already a little bit ahead of the game in one sense that we've been factoring in a number of these policies anyway. And of course, we have got the Green Innovation Corridor in terms of advanced manufacturing and construction coming to Wolverhampton. So we're in a good place. I want us to do the right thing, but I don't want to see any of our projects delayed. You know, there's a number of projects that we're ready to go with, but we're still waiting sometimes in terms of funding. That'll be another debate. I think you said last Friday, we're ready to go. We are, but we want to do it the right way in a balanced approach. Thanks.
Okay, my understanding is this doesn't affect projects that are currently in the pipeline. That's the first point. And certainly we did say we wanted to give profile the fact about the how the CA and the funding and the various pots that it had were there to help, and that's why we had that discussion. In terms of the actual way these things are processed, I'm not the best person to comment on that, probably. I don't know whether anyone is, but I think, frankly, Steve, we're very mindful of what you say. And I guess if there are, I hate dealing with generalities because in these sort of projects, every project is its own person, so to speak. And if there is my view is if there is a project which someone thinks is being held up, then to bring it to attention, and officers, or I'm happy to delve in anyway, as will John be, to make sure that all the wheels are oiled and, you know, things are loosened to bring it on. But there is a project, and these things often quite technical and need a lot of work. Any officers want to follow up on that or comment on what I've just said? Right, Leo.
Yeah, just to sort of echo really what's been said here. It's definitely not the intention in any circumstance to frustrate delivery of existing schemes or even schemes a bit further upstream in the pipeline, which is why we've made the changes to the report that we have in terms of staggering our introduction of these standards. The most immediate, the only immediate additional costs that would be brought on are in relation to measuring whole life carbon and the embodied carbon impact of schemes against the RICS calculator, which tends to be, we're told, around sort of 2,000-3,000 for smaller developments and up to 10,000 for larger developments. This is not per unit, this is for the entire development, I should add, before you get spooked on intervention rates and so on. We're trying to kind of gently ease this in. The intention is always to take a very pragmatic approach. We're just one part of the wider kind of capital stack. We're providing a grant. We're providing an amount of grant which is introduced as kind of the only, which is brought forward as the only kind of leverage that we have to influence the embodied energy and operational energy impact of new schemes. So hopefully we'll see our standards and national government standards beginning to align. I know that our initiatives, which have been leading nationally, have had quite a bit of influence on what's happened nationally. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Courts, in terms of reflecting the leadership role. There's sort of two elements of this. There's one, which is the importance of getting contractors to share best practice and economical ways of achieving these standards over months and years ahead. And of course, the leadership role that we have taken in WMCA to actually bring forward these standards, because there isn't another region doing this and really trying to drive forward the agenda for net zero housing. So thank you for your comments.
Okay, fine, Mia.
I was just going to quickly add as well, we've got a section in the report that does detail around the funding for 2025, so the funds that are coming forward sooner and naturally treated slightly differently because we're aware of the sort of sensitivities around the intervention rates there. So there is that consideration to kind of note as well. And as Leo says, you know, it's not like a blanket introduction immediately for every scheme that's with us. Naturally, there's a consideration that many schemes are already existing and progressing. So there's been quite a lot of consideration around that should be covered in that section of the report, hopefully.
Okay, right. In which case, I shall just take us to recommend that for action and decision at the beginning, page 5. So first of all, we're being asked, there's quite a few here, so I'm going to have to go through. First of all, we're noting progress on the Homes for the Future programme and the input from Future Homes Task Force. Now, and we're asked to discuss and comment on the final draft. Now, this has been before us at least once, in fact, if not twice, and there's been opportunity. So, I mean, there is still a final time for putting in comments, but I think, you know, generally this seems to be well supported. Next thing is discuss feedback provided for Homes for the Future event. I mean, we've given that, but I just, for those who were there, I just think it was an incredible, enthusiastic response that we had from the industry. That's not just the building industry, but consultants. I thought it was, in terms of the direction of travel, that we were on. So I think that was extremely positive when we did that. So endorse the official release for WMCA's Homes for the Future proposals. That's what we've been asked to do. Consider the release of HMG's Future Homes Standard Consultant. Well, we have looked at that. It's referred to in the report. We think what we're doing is compatible, perhaps a bit more flexible and appropriate. We're asked to note the progress, discuss and comment on work today on the common strategy and implementation plan. I don't know whether feedback's been provided separately from that anywhere, but and then the final thing is to consider our response to Future Homes and Building Standards 2023 consultation approved document L, conservation of fuel and power and minimisation of greenhouse gases. volume 2, gosh, that's long. Buildings other than dwellings, which consider the standards in relation to non-domestic dwellings. I mean, you know, we're primarily, this focus seems to be on housing and residential, but we all know that it's massively important for non-residential in a variety of different ways, both insulation type stuff, but also emissions generally. And obviously, the more we can influence those, the better. But I think that is, you know, pushing the residential will also push the others. So those are what we've been asked to do. I've got no more hands up. If everyone's happy with that, then we'll progress on and let's get going with it. So, okay, and Mike, you got yeah, okay.
Just a brief comment. I don't know where you would incorporate it, but if we are looking for zero carbon and low emissions, what we need to be doing somewhere, not necessarily in this document, is saying that we're looking for somebody to base their operations of AMC in the West Midlands.
Yeah.
Because all of it comes in. I mean, we've got one in Aldridge, which all their timber comes in from Sweden, you know, which is probably because it's good timber. I don't know. But I've got this wish that we could get somebody, and obviously with the, say, for instance, the Shropshire plan, junction 3 of the M54 could provide, hopefully, I'm pushing to get somebody over there because it's within 20 minutes drive of all of the Black Country authorities. So I think somewhere, not necessarily in this document, but somewhere we need to start waving the flag and saying we're open for business. I have to say, and I'm not being patronising because John's here, but I chaired the Housing Land Board, as you know, but I've seen a massive difference in how officers are now approaching potential developers with grants. With John and Martin, there's been a change of attitude from those two individuals, and it comes from the top. And I've had that back from the industry, and I think that's great. Gareth was okay, but very insular, and I think we've got now an open book idea of how our officers can tap into those developers. And we're still not doing enough as an authority, combined authority, to say we're there to help in difficult sites. And I think that needs to be message that we should be shouting from the rooftops, really.
Okay, I'm picking up 2 or 3 things from that, Mike, and I think you're absolutely right, of course, and I think we can probably help on that. Just to deal with the last point, I mean, that was actually the point that we made on Friday at the board about the fact that we are here to help. It's a matter of engagement, and one of the things I want to see much more is an engagement with industry, which I think there's sometimes a reluctance to do, but you know, because of, you know, the private sector got individual parts, but I think we must do that. In terms of advanced manufacturing, there's a lot going on now. I was at a company a few weeks ago, and you know, and indeed at one point I was a number of years, 30 years ago, I was responsible for one of these companies. What we're seeing is there is an issue of volume, because there's a reluctance sometimes for one developer to use another developer's product and whatever. There is a reluctance on that, but you know what we will be trying to encourage here is volume, because the problem that often they have is that issue of volume. You can have a factory, but you need a throughput because the overheads of the factory are very high. Now, what's their role in this? First of all, the leadership role in terms of pushing this advanced manufacturing will help, because there'll be sometimes, you know, smaller developers that will want to tap into that. But secondly, and this is a really important point that you're making, is that we're in the middle of England. You know, we're in the middle of here. We're 2 hours drive from most parts, actually, something like 80%. We have factory space. We have locations across the West Midlands where we can accommodate different resort factories, not necessarily big things, or all sorts of things. So, and that's where I think, I mean, I'm not sure whether it's function of this board, but I do think in the minutes we should record that we need to promote much more strongly that the West Midlands is open for business. There are sites available, not necessarily that we own, but across which means that we've an ideal place to promote this agenda. So I think that we need that in the minutes, Mike. I think we need those points strongly recommended. Take Andy's comment, then I must move on.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Councillor Bird said and yourself. I just want to reflect that in the West Midlands, there are small manufacturers, a small operating units owned by a big like Keystone, that could contribute to this. And I think maybe the CA should actually do a survey of what is in the region and sort of cluster it, because each individual is very hard for them to be on the marketplace. But we might have in ourselves a cluster and expertise already in the region that we could sort of bring together and maybe use that to sort of seed more investment in the region.
Andy, fantastic point. When you mention the Ray survey, I get filled with dread that we're going to use consultants and go out and spend a lot of money. Whereas you and I would say we'll spend an hour on the internet and actually we'll draw up a list of assets, say, look, this is what we think is the list of assets. If someone's missed us out, quite an idea that, and I think that would be a, sometimes when you're in parts of the world, the States, for instance, you see these things where they point you in different directions. So I think a list of our construction and development assets, and there are factories around, we're full of them because that's what West Midlands is, and especially reflecting on the sustainability agenda, and that's what we're being pushed strong in the Midlands. I think there's something there that perhaps officers should think of.
Just for our interest, there's one in Shirley we probably don't know about that make pre-built houses. Just small.
Which I started 4 years ago.
That's right. So that they exist. So there's fantastic contributions there. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on and try and keep to time, but that is great. So let's push it on. We're now on to employment land, plan for growth employment land update, and we're going to have I say an update on this. It's actually quite relevant, bearing in mind the last conversation we had. Clearly we need to, and the purpose of the study that we've done is to identify employment land sites, that's 25 hectares and above, but might be others with even potential locations for sites that where we need to build or manufacture or whatever, up to about 2045. Now what's happened is we've had very good cross CA working, and this is I think one of the things that's been good to see all of us come together, because some local authorities have sites available, others don't, but if by working together we can point in each direction, and and the CA of course has been working on this study. It was commissioned I think by the local authorities with Combined Authority as its partner. So if we can have an update on this, John. Employment land, we're easy to talk about housing, but employment is so important for the reason we've just said. John.
This is one really for Leo, but the only point I'd make up front is that when I was an investor in places in my last job, I always had a rule of thumb that for every 100 square feet of employment land, you needed 1,000 of housing. So the two really do need to go together across a region or a space. So this is hopefully something that will be helpful for local authority partners. It's also hopefully something that will feed into longer term planning and to the future work of the CA once we have hopefully a single settlement funding where we can bring these things together in a more coherent, if you like, way. So, but I'll hand over to Leo to comment on the report in a bit more depth.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Councillor Courts. This item does segue very neatly, actually, on from the discussion you were just having about securing sites for AMC contractors and investing in the region. The AMC kind of cluster is one of 8 that are covered in the plan for growth. So I'm not going to kind of detail all of those, but I would just add that there is a cluster already. Worry not, but there won't be a big survey for detailing all of the firms that would potentially come under the pre-manufactured value standard. But there are 28 that we have identified, and at least 2 of the category 1 contractors in a list that I can stick in the chat or circulate after this meeting that we know are investing in new capacity in the region at present. So there is a positive story to tell on that, but of course much further to go, given the kind of wider backdrop for construction costs and sale values and so on. On this employment land item, I'll try to be brief. It's in many respects a very difficult data collection exercise because we're trying to tease out every employment land provision and need there is at different sizes and scales and types of employment land in all local authorities. So we've made quite a bit of progress since we last met on that score. A couple of specific updates I just want to flag with you that might be of interest. So one is that we have been part of a wider group that has commissioned a strategic employment site study looking for to detail the shortfall of sites 25 hectares and larger, specifically looking at logistics and manufacturing needs in the region. And we just in the last, and this was, I should add, commissioned by senior planners, many of whom are actually on this call. I've seen Ian Cully and Maria Dunn, who sit on the steering group for this piece of work. It's been a very lengthy document that came to us just a few days ago, which we've been discussing among the officer group. But unexpectedly, it does detail that there are significant shortfalls of large sites that can cater for the expansion of logistics and manufacturing uses in the region, with all the job opportunities and effects that come with that. So that is just and the idea that once we have a final version of this, there are still comments coming in from different authorities across the region and from ourselves. Once we have a version of this will serve as the evidence base for local plans to try and incorporate new site designations that can cater for that need. And they propose a series of broad locations across the region to that end. It's a significant piece of work that should hopefully be coming to a conclusion sometime next month. So we'll be eager to share it with the board at a suitable time. One other thing I just wanted to mention as well that's sort of touched on in the report is the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act had a number of areas that kind of touch on this agenda, but one quite eye-opening area was in relation to compulsory purchase reform. So there are new provisions for ensuring that compulsory purchase process is made simpler and quicker, and that the valuation methods allow for sums that go below the hope value, the sort of speculative premium that's been baked into how compensation terms are arrived at. So this is a very early stage in terms of DLUHC's engagement. I think we're front of the queue for having some engagement internally with colleagues at DLUHC, looking at the implications of these CPO reforms, but they do potentially impact on this agenda and on another of other agendas, given that there is a lot of pressure on the recycling of brownfield sites. There's pressure on protection of greenfield sites, of course, and as the reports that we received through the Strategic Employment Site Study touches on, these pressures are reflected in higher land values, higher private rents, and many of the kind of large-scale investors being priced out of available large sites. So we're interested to just keep a close eye on how the CPO reform, secondary legislation and case studies actually land, but we'll be engaging closely with our colleagues at DLUHC to see the extent to which it can apply in our region and produce the kind of benefits we're looking for. So I'll leave it at that, but interested for any comments on this report.
Well, I should be interested to see what happens with the CPO reforms, because if there are anything like planning reforms, there are usually sound bites saying we're going to wave a magic wand, but when you get down to the grassroots of actually making these things happen, it's got the same inspectors, the same lawyers, the same issues and the same things that stop the process moving before. Certainly, that I say that experience in planning, and I've got that now actually, and I'm absolutely sure that with CPO, it's we'll see, but whether it gets into the roots of it, of the problems, is another matter. Now I've got Mike to see. Just before Mike comes in, can I just check that you asked about the survey of available land for this purpose, and I just presumably this was looking at a map as opposed to looking at viability of sites, because I'm just interested to know the relationship between availability and viability, because obviously sometimes sites are there but they've not been viable, which of course is where we've been making all the work on the brownfield stuff and a brownfield action. And just a final throwaway comment, which got a bit more blue for the last item, but also this item, is that, you know, Mike talked about the importance of the region being good for expansion. That's why we're doing this. Andy talked about the need for understanding what assets we already have. But there's a point that glues this together with, well, my love portfolio, which is, you know, we're in the centre of England, but the more we can make, promote, manufacture, use locally, it's going to have a massive importance for our industry, as well as, you know, decarbonisation and various other, well, pollution and all sorts of things. So, right, over to you, Mike.
Very much what you've just said, Chairman. I think there's two things. First of all, the CPO is a very important tool. There are many developers, many landowners who've just would rather have their land sit there because they aren't making any more of it. I don't know if you've noticed that. And so therefore the value just increases. We've had this specifically in Willenhall. I mentioned earlier Junction 3 of the M54. I think there's about 100 acres of potential land there for development by way of employment land. And I know that the inspector has basically said to Shropshire, go back because your plan's rubbish. And it's likely that that will come forward. Now, that is very much beneficial to our region because it's Junction 3 of the 54, as I said, he's 20 minutes away. But I think what we also need to look at is large sites that are heavily contaminated, and we need to go to government and say we need a specific one-off grant here. The one we've got in Walsall, Spark as it was called, or Phoenix 10, which Homes England have assisted with, that was the most polluted site in Europe, where pollution from that site was ended up in the North Sea. Now, that in itself has been lying there for certainly during my lifetime as the councillor, which is over 40 years. I think it's been redundant for about 50 years, but now we've actually got into it. We've decontaminated the site. And as a result, people are queuing up to go there. Now, that is a message that we should be sending back to government, saying that the combined authority may need one-off grants for specific sites, large sites, for that employment purpose. And I've often said, and I'll repeat it now, we are here as a regional asset. If we can't locate somebody in Walsall and they can locate them in Solihull, Dudley, Wolverhampton, Sandwell, or even Birmingham, then we should direct them to that. And I think we ought to have a little more cooperation because coming back to where we are with people manufacturing houses, people don't want to, or developers don't want to use somebody else's product, but why not? You know, very much like the saddle makers in Walsall. You know, you train a saddle maker and then he goes and works for the competitor. So there is this secrecy element which we need to break apart. But more importantly, we need to have more cooperation between councils and council officers to identify people looking for an employment site and directing them to where a local authority might be able to have availability of land.
Thanks, Mike. I mean, good luck with the secrecy bit. That's the same with every private company. As somebody who was there, I'm not sure you'll get a lot of cooperation with some. Ironically, in the States, it's very different because they're not particularly secret on the basis, you know, you tell me your secrets now, but you don't know where I'm going to be in 6 months' time. And it's interesting how we're very protected. Now, But there's another point I'd like to add to what Mike has said, is that on contamination, and I would like us to have a think, obviously to have a think about how we can put forward representations to government if we don't think this is being covered, because very often, you know, if you're building houses on a site, it's really quite difficult because someone might dig the site and create crabbages or whatever, and so you've got to be very careful with what decontamination you do. I have a feeling with employment side, it's easier to cap and seal in nasties, which means that there's a flexibility there. In an ideal world, it should be less costly, but I would quite like some feedback, not particularly as me, but to learn more about you know, our approach on employment sites and our approach to government. Now I've got Andy, and then I see I've got Steve, which I think is C. Yes, it's Steve, isn't it? If Steve wants to come in, and then Andy.
Just to follow up on the contamination, I work for Courtaulds. We contaminated most of the West Midlands over the last century. The issue of contaminated.
Jumped in, Andy. It was Steve. To Steve on. I think it's Steve, isn't it? You online?
Yeah.
Yeah. You were first,
Oh,
Andy. Wait.
Okay. Listen, thanks, Chair. No, I just wanted to support Mike's comments, actually. And, you know, Wolverhampton has got the Brownfield Institute. People will be aware of that. And we should be the capital of advanced manufacturing. And without doubt, every council will have information, won't they, on industrial sites. So I just try to understand what the added value is, because I agree with the chair. You know, these CAs, there is a supportive element, in my view, to try and help with things like remediating land. But we've got our projects, we've got our information. I just try to understand, you know, what it is you're looking for when you're talking about doing surveys. And I think Ian said, or it was Mike, that hang on, you know, you're not talking about assessing everywhere, etc., etc. You know, you should be able to tap into that information from our council officers, shouldn't you? And say, right, what support do you need? Right, this is where we're going to go. And yes, the government should be financially supporting the West Midlands, all 7 Mets. But certainly, and you'd expect me to say this, you know, Wolverhampton has got a huge stake in this. We've got a number of sites that we're ready to go and do things on. And we have got Advanced Manufacturing Centre of Excellence at the Brownfield Institute. And if you haven't visited, I'd suggest at some point in the future, you're more than welcome to come as a committee, or even put a meeting or some sort of event on at the Brownfield Institute. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, and I've been there 2 or 3 times now. In fact, the launch was there. Excellent facility. It's something we need to promote more widely, actually. And you know, can we love that? The point about the survey, I think it's quite simple. The point is, are we marketing the region enough for inward investment? I think Andy Street is doing that very thing, but sometimes it's down to, you know, is there an easy way of tapping into what sites, etc., might be available, and particularly those that probably are not on the agents board, but might need a bit of decontamination or something. I think that's what's in mind there. So it's Andy.
Yeah, as I say, you know, Courtaulds, you know, because it's a 100-year company, contaminated its land. And the issue with the contamination land is not the contamination, it's the decontamination. So when we got taken over by AkzoNobel, in order to shift some of the businesses, basically offered a bond that they will clean up the land. So any use of contaminated land, if there is a bond that will say, actually, we will when the factory is ended, when the factory comes to an end, that will be cleaned up, then that will facilitate use of that land and sale, providing there's no acute issue. And that's what AkzoNobel have done on the Courtauld sites. So all the ex-Courtauld sites in the UK have a bond by AkzoNobel that they will clean up if your business closes. And when we looked at acquisition, we had an acquisition of a plant for £1, but we didn't take that acquisition because the contaminated land was we didn't know what the contaminated land issue was, and that was too much of a risk in the acquisition. So it's a question of maybe not decontaminating it, but providing that bond from government saying you're not responsible, and that's the way you can get forward without any cash. And that's the issue from my side. But on the paper, I think we just need to look at the strategic context and the last history. You know, I was in China in 1998, and they were embarrassed by Hong Kong, and they decided to bring in manufacturing. So and consultants came in the UK, say, well, actually, you can manufacture your ball bearings, you can manufacture these things in China, you do the value added, and you save a lot of money. And my clients did so. The last few years, they've been bit by that because of the costs from China are so high, and then we've lost that manufacturing capability. So I think the reason Birmingham exists is because it's the centre of the country and it can supply the country. It was bombed without mercy during the war, which was kept a secret from the public, but it was flattened, more so than Coventry, because that's where all the ball bearings were, all the bits of equipment that would feed the whole manufacturing train. So I think as part of this, you say we want to, high value, but also we need to be sure of our strategic value in the West Midlands to actually provide the key raw materials that we can manufacture in the supply chain for strategic reasons, so we're not held to ransom by China, and that we can feed other industry in the whole of the UK. And that's our traditional role. I'd like to maybe in that document, it's some reflection of the traditional, that we are the hub of the manufacturing industry in the UK because of our communications, our centre, and our light engineering expertise in the area. That's why that's my personal view.
Okay, well, it pulls it all together. I mean, we're in the same theme about promoting this region. It's the same theme of local, the importance of the Midlands being in the centre, and what we've got here is an employment land, focus, where we're trying to pull together the assets that we can promote. And there are a lot of assets. Indeed, I mean, there are assets, for particularly on employment land, big employment. Well, we don't have it in Solihull, but I know very well Wolverhampton does, because I think it was some time ago at a promotion how there was a very good document listing all the sites that are available, and it's pulling that all together. And that's what this region is all about, working together so that one authority can put in what another may not have. Now, I think that you're right.
Yeah. I did a lot of work on this when we had the Coventry and Warwickshire LEC on employment land. An awful lot of work was done on this one. And in terms of infrastructure, it's one of the main things. And I think that picture up there basically illustrates what you need. And most of the kind of like large units are going up round junctions, large motorways. In my region, everybody's kind of targeting the A5, the A45, around the M6 and all the junctions. Warwickshire is fortunate in the fact that it's kind of the centre of the motorway network, and as such, the logistics companies have come there. But they want to be able to get in and out quickly. And it's just a problem with the centre of Birmingham. Getting in and out quickly is not necessarily an easy thing to do. And so that's why Birmingham, in some respects, has got to concentrate on the people industries, and the outside will concentrate on the logistics and manufacturing business, because they've got that. The other big problem we found when we was doing employment land, because we were a two-tier authority, we had all our 5 different authorities allocate employment land well before halfway through kind of our planning period for each one of those authorities. The employment land had run out. Never did they ever allocate enough land for employment land. We was always running out, to the point where now we've got kind of speculative planning applications all over the place because we've run out of employment land. The other aspect of it was the big boys bought up the land at £500,000 an acre, but the small units didn't get a look in. So we're doing things in Warwickshire now where basically any big site comes up, there is an allocation for small units. So as the startups, the small businesses get a look in, and then they've got a stepping stone onto the bigger units. But if you kind of just put it big sheds, the new businesses, the small businesses, the startups don't get a chance. So we're trying to kind of create a balance in terms of the amount of units that we're kind of doing in Warwickshire. And that's why we're using a property company to do that. But they're the observations that we came from Coventry and Warwickshire. It's about infrastructure. And that's what the big businesses and the big shed builders want.
And that's the point really, is the business knows what it wants. What we're trying to do is to prevent a product and land that we hope they will go for, but in the end they have particular requirements. Even as I moved a business up here, you know, I didn't know the local authority structure then. You go for a particular area. Right, okay. I'm sort of conscious on time. Quick, Andy, because I need to move on.
Just, we need to also consider manufacturers who have got excess space. I've been to a few that have got excess space, and they're basically, because the company shrunk, they're basically doing something in much too much space. 4 to 5 times of empty space, you rattle around. There might be a case of relocating that business to a bespoke new manufacturing site and utilising that asset for something bigger. And I think we should consider that.
Yeah, okay, that's excess space. You're absolutely right, and redundant space, I suppose. Okay, I think we've done that one, and it's been good. We're asked to note the employment land agenda, specifically activity of the working group, and alignment with the plan for growth, and to discuss, and we have discussed how the WMC can add value to the agenda around employment land, and we can, and align it with the priorities in the plan for growth, and consider the future agenda items for the working group. We haven't done, well, I think we have done that actually. You maybe have to unpick some. So that's a great discussion, thank you, and really important for the region. Thank you very much. We're now moving on to place pilots update. Nigel, right, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is just really largely an information report for you to explain the work that's been going on, what Place Pilots is all about. If I just go back to some of the basics on this, it's fundamentally a way of getting all public sector bodies to talk together, whether central government, local governments, blue light services, across the region, to join up together to have that holistic look at better use of public sector asset management. It's a Cabinet Office inspired idea. We were the first in the country to start. There's about half a dozen across the country. We're the only combined authority, and therefore we're probably the most complex in these in terms of trying to draw this piece of work together. So it is taking shape now. We do have some really good conversations going on. The paper highlights some of the themes that we've picked up through some of the workshops and the pilots of work we want to carry on and move forward. So it's really, again, that thing about how we can make the best use of public assets for the benefit of the localities. So a sense of improvement of place, delivery of services in the right way through the public assets that we have, but also making sure those done in an efficient way collaboratively, and to ensure that wider benefits of sharing information. And that's been one of the golden thread through all of this, has been about not having all the information on public assets across those different organisations in one place. And that's a piece of work specifically that has been commissioned now to draw that together, so we can map out fully the local authority, the central government, the NHS, other blue light services, all in one place, so we can get some proper strategic view about how best to use those assets. That's fundamentally what it's about. We have as I say, we've had some themed workshops to date, which are illustrated in the paper. It does seem to have had this collaboration. We do have that change in culture in terms of these bodies talking to each other who didn't before. And there's examples going ahead now, and for a future meeting, we'll come back with some of the achievements coming out of that and some of the themes about working together. So, for instance, I know we have Department of Work and Pensions speak to local authorities about youth sharing assets and making sure they've got the right visibility, the right location to provide their services. That's one example at one end. At another end, we've got that thinking about things like depots, where we know there's an issue for all the public bodies in terms of making sure where they're for transport purposes, that they're suitable for electrification in the future. How do we work together in terms of sharing some of those facilities, and how equally can we share best practice of what people have done? Another example I'll just highlight is about health hubs, that one local authority area has worked with health particularly to develop that, and that best practice is being shared across the region with other local authorities. We've been able to share that information, and I do feel we've actually got a change of culture in terms of that collaboration moving forward. That's the outline of the paper fundamentally. I can go into further detail, but I'm happy to take any questions about what we're learning from it and how we start to move forward.
Okay, I think we certainly all support the principle and direction of this. I think it gets a bit more difficult when you get to individual organisations.
Yeah.
Certainly, I won't mention names, but we've got that. I mean, the reality is, if I'm an organisation strapped for cash and I've got an asset that's worth some money, you know, being public-minded and flexible is one thing, but it's my money, mate, not yours. I mean, the more we can push this, but my own belief is this may need some teeth, a direction from government to actually say, well, you know, just what is your justification for working in the silo that you are working in, public sector organisation number one. So, okay.
Can I just answer that point? I think this is an important point that you make there. And Cabinet Office, we work with, we have regular meetings with them about the progress we're making. They put us in touch with other place pilots so we can share, and as we were the first one, that we're actually sharing some of the things we've learned, the way things are happening. And I think there is just that understanding, there's the common sense approach here that actually if we do all work together, we can make more out of what we have. And that is becoming realised now. As part of what we're going to do locally is to create a place forum, which we launch at the end of January, and that will bring at a higher level strategic view all the work we've done, so we can share that and get that higher level strategic view and see the benefit of joining stuff together rather than that silo work. You're absolutely right. That's a historic issue we've had. We are starting to break through some of that now.
Right. Good luck, Andy.
Yeah, I think it's good. I would hope that this mapping will go on a GIS system so local authorities can actually look on, you know, where their land is, so to actually make that use. I think, and the second point is maybe you should also include land that's got no ownership and Crown land as well. Because there's land I know in the borough that has no ownership because for whatever reason it's just no one owns it, and then that will default to someone. I think it might default to local authority or might default to the Crown. So we ought to map those as well to make sure we don't see opportunities there.
I think certainly all registered title we can put on there. That's likely to be unregistered land is what you're talking about there. But so that might be a more difficult one. I don't know the answer to that in particular, but I think it's just a case this data sharing is fundamental. And one of the issues we have is that central government departments use a system called EPIMS. They're mandated to do that. Local authorities, it's a voluntary thing whether they do that, and we know that local authorities across the piece aren't up to date in terms of that information. The NHS uses something else called SHAPE. That's a different tool again. We need to draw it all together, and that's the commission we've made, is to try and draw this together, and then we need to work out how best to do that. But we will get a sense from those partners that we're talking about how it's going to be best for them to receive that information. And whilst we haven't got the solution definitively, we know what the common aim is.
I think what Andy said, I mean, note your point about register. I'm a lawyer, property lawyer, and I'm telling you, if someone has a name on a title, what can be done, you can still have numerous problems, because after 12 years, you're into litigation. And I've got, you know, we all probably somewhere buried in the system have cases of where there's an argument about it. And, you know, you spend thousands because you got no choice. You can have a registered title, but if you haven't kept an eye on that land and someone else is sitting there, you're in trouble. So I think the point, but what you say is absolutely right. And I think the register, I think, point of knowing who owns what is good, because the other thing is the boundaries aren't necessarily there on the ground. They're not necessarily the same boundaries on the ground. You know, they just, you know, things like roads often aren't in a title. They're not in a title because you know, the developers don't want them.
Don't want
You
to
know,
be responsible.
they go to the local, you know, the responsibility goes to the local authority, but the actual ownership doesn't.
Yeah.
Now, in a future time, and I can see with HS2, you know, the work that's being done where some roads are being moved, you think, I wonder what's going to happen to the roads that are, we better do some homework on that actually. But, anyway, okay, that's I think that's good. And Mike?
Just briefly, Chairman, because I'm conscious of time. I think the point is well made that the intrinsic value of assets, let's take police stations, for instance. Police stations, when they're sold, I never object because police stations don't cast criminals, policemen do. But that's what they say, well, we're selling this and we're going to put it back into our revenue budget. Now, that's the problem you've got. That, as you say, the silo is, this is the police authority, sod off, you ain't touching our land, you know what I mean? So that's the one issue. But the wider issue is, I think what would be a good exercise is for us as a combined authority to look what Crown land is in the combined
That's what
authority,
Andy
which
said,
is similar
yeah.
to what Andy said. Because when a company goes bust or whatever, invariably it does revert back to the Crown in many cases. But the rules of their disposal is they have to dispose all of the parcel of land. They can't sell part of it. And I've had this argument in a couple of cases of Crown land in Wolverhampton. They say, no, you've got to buy all of it or none of it. And so obviously you can end up with, as you say, a liability. But you make a good point about the roads, and it is because invariably the local authority will own the substrata, but the freehold underneath belongs to the original landowner.
Yeah.
So you get all of the pain and none of the gain.
I mean, the legal situation is that when you adopt a road, you have a sort of ownership. You don't have ownership. You have a sort of responsibility and authority over such parts of the road for the highway purposes. Which is why sometimes you find trees that are in highway land. Actually, they're in the subsoil or were there before they were adopted, and actually the responsibility of the owner of the land next to it. It's horrendously complicated, but I won't go in there unless anyone wants a particular lesson. But you named names and I didn't on the police.
You know me.
Well, that's absolutely fine, and I was trying to not stir it up because I could be here for another hour over this subject. But the police are leading on this aspect. I'd love to lead on this, but it's the police. So
Could be the mayor soon then.
well, with a bit of luck, yeah, that's what we want. Don't go there. But what we're trying to do is to help the police in that. But you're absolutely right. It's in the police estate, and I mean, it's fine saying, well, it's an old asset, but moving a business or moving a function these days, just look at IT, is massively costly. And that's why the idea if I'm going to get some capital out of a site is pretty small compared to the cost of moving that thing. But there we are. That's done. That's done that. So handy. Let's keep that going. It's good work. Now we've got 2 update items in the sort of 20 minutes, because if it's not, Mike's coach turns into a pumpkin or something. So we've got 20 minutes. So we've got roughly 10 minutes on each of the 2 updates now, which is first is affordable housing. And that's Rob. Yeah, Rob.
It is, Chair, thank you. And
Rob showed. So you've only got 15 minutes, as it's all you.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. And to be honest, these are very brief updates, but really just wanted to make a couple of progress updates to the board following previous discussions at previous committees. So on the affordable housing side of things, just wanted to update on the progress with engagement across the region on thinking about the programme from 2026. So members will recall that the devolution deal announced last March includes the transfer of the Affordable Homes Programme to the Combined Authority and partners from 2026 onwards. So we're thinking already about how that process might work and what we might like to implement in the region. So as part of that process, we've established a number of working groups with representation from local authorities, registered providers and other parts of the sector and other industry bodies and such like, to talk through and to try and understand how the current programme works, where there might be some differences in the future, and what we do, what we wouldn't want to change, or what the region sees as working with the current programme, and making sure that we don't have wholesale change for change's sake. We've had the first round of those sessions in November and December, and yesterday we had the first of the round 2. So we've got 6 of these different groups set up, and we've had really strong representation from local authorities and RPs. As I mentioned, we've had over 90 representatives from across the board on the 6 groups, including 30 from local authorities and roughly the same from registered providers. So we're seeing a really great response, and we're getting really strong feedback. We're collating evidence, and we are very much looking at how we start to build the proposition back to government as part of the post-2026 deal in terms of what we would like to see in the region. So that work is ongoing. And as I say, we intend to bring a paper to the next board meeting to give a paper update on progress more fully and in paper format. But I did want to just update members and thank colleagues across the region for their input and engagement in this process, because it is really valuable and very important for us to hear the views and the thoughts across the region of different local authorities and different organisations. So I thank you to colleagues for that, and just another call out really, if colleagues are aware of others that could feed in or would like to hear more about the current proposals and where we're thinking, then please do get in touch and we can add them into the groups in future as we work forward. So that's the update there, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, well, obviously this is a really important, it's a very big piece of work, and you know, I understand we're getting close. This strategic partnership with Homes England is working at pace. It's really important that we get this right, that we get this successful, that it works, and we well, lead the way, because you know, affordable homes is a massive importance across the region. So you know, we note what you say. I think just for John's reference, it'd be quite nice to have an update, an intermediate update between meetings for me, when we just to see how we go on. I'd just like to see how it's going to work personally before as we take it forward. So that's it. Any questions? Or yeah, Mike?
Only a brief comment, Chairman. That is to say, can we get the definition of affordable? I've said this many times, as you know. What's affordable in Stratford-on-Avon, what's affordable in Solihull, and what's affordable in Sandwell? They are miles apart. And so that needs to be at the forefront of what we consider to be affordable, even if it means in different locations.
Okay. Rob, okay.
Yeah, I'll recirculate the previous papers, Chair, on that topic, but I think it's worth just mentioning that one of the working groups is focused specifically on exactly what Councillor Bird says about the differences in affordability across the region and how we might be able to look at that in a different way in a forthcoming programme. So that's very much at the forefront of our minds, but I will circulate the papers as mentioned.
I think whenever we get into this whole area of topic, the one thing that's always raised is exactly what Mike said, is what is affordable. It's one of the least understood things, and I think has been made progressively more complicated as well, government in particular, but as put new ideas in it, all of which are good, but you know, sometimes we have to keep these things simple. Okay, so that's one update. Now we've got the Housing and Land Fund update, which is equally as important.
Thank you, Chair. So again, an update on where we are currently with the various housing and land funds. So I think, as has been mentioned at previous housing and land boards, the current funds that we had in existence prior to the devolution deal, so the land fund from 2018, and then the various guises of the Brownfield Housing Fund that were awarded to the CA from 2020 onwards. There's been a thorough review, which John and Martin have been working on in particular, in terms of how those funds are deployed, what our current pipeline looks like, and how we look to potentially move schemes between funds to make sure that we're hitting the targets for each of the specific funds. A piece of work on that was taken to Investment Board in November at the end of last year, which has set out how those changes might be applied and how we will move various different schemes across, so that we give ourselves more opportunity to deliver against the timescales for the funds and make sure that we give ourselves the best opportunity to deliver against those timescales. That work's been ongoing and has been really really positive in terms of refocusing where we will be looking to develop in the future, particularly around the pipeline of schemes coming through. And I think it's fair to say that because of the work that's been ongoing with that information, the dashboards that we have previously provided to this board haven't come in the last 2 months because of the work on the pipeline, but we'll be bringing back the revised dashboards from the next meeting onwards. In terms of the new fund, so the £100 million fund that was included as part of the devolution deal, we've been negotiating and corresponding with government for quite some time since the agreement in the deal of that £100 million. We've now reached agreement on the terms of that fund, and we are due to receive the first year's payment of that fund. So 33 million of the 100 million in total is due to be received by the Combined Authority this month. Clearly, that will mean that we're looking to deploy schemes against that fund ASAP, and we are colleagues in that CA are talking to local authority colleagues about what's in the pipeline and how we might be able to bring schemes forward in particular. But worth just noting that we're very much open for opportunity and open for representations on schemes that would come through. As part of that process, we're also looking to do a marketing campaign for the funds that the Combined Authority currently holds. So the devolved funds that we have for housing and land delivery, we're going to be going out from February onwards with a marketing campaign out to businesses, out to developers, out to opportunities to really kind of widen the net and bring in as many schemes as possible, as was referred to earlier, in terms of really promoting what the Combined Authorities funds are there to do and how we can work together with our local partners and local authorities to bring those schemes forward. So that marketing campaign is due to kick off next month. And as part of that, the Combined Authorities presence at UK Reef conference in May will be focused on those funding programmes and the investment prospectus for the region, which is being refreshed as well, which highlights some of the key opportunities across the region. So the £100 million has now been agreed, and the heads of terms are agreed. So as I say, we're waiting on the payment this month for the first tranche of that funding. I think it is worth just saying that the government targets that we have been set for this fund is still very much focused on housing outputs. So as part of the devolution proposals to government, we were very focused on trying to get a wider output around commercial land and other things. The department have come back very much with a housing focus still on this fund, but it does give us a better average intervention rate. So in effect, we are looking to deliver 4,000 new homes for the £100 million, which gives us, on average, obviously, and it would vary from scheme to scheme, but on average gives us an intervention rate of 25,000 per home, which is significantly more than the previous funds that we've had. So it does give us more flexibility to invest into more difficult and expensive schemes in future. So that is a positive. So that's the brief update on the funding situation. As I say, Chair, we'll be bringing the dashboards and a report back to the next board, but I wanted to update in the meantime on those points.
Okay, and I mean, I'm interested in that intervention rate. I mean, sometimes with difficult sites, even 25,000 is, it's actually not necessarily a lot when you've got a lot of things and stuff in there. John, I think it's directly, would you like to make a few final comments on this?
Yes, I'll do it very briefly, as Rob has covered this quite extensively, but this has been a big piece of work. And by reallocating projects across the 3 existing funds and potentially the new fund, we significantly improve the chances of those funds achieving or getting closer to their targets. And the first outcome of all of that will be, and this follows from the approval of the investment board of the Coventry City Centre South scheme the other day. This will enable us to hit the target on the National Competitiveness Fund. So that is one of the 3 existing funds done with a slight surplus as it stands at the moment. So we will continue to adjust between the 2 other existing funds, the Brownfield Housing Fund and the Land Fund. And of course, we will then direct our marketing efforts very much at this new £100 million fund, which, like the others, has quite pressing deadlines. So we need to move very fast on this. The deadlines for the Brownfield Housing Fund are March 25, and the Land Fund is 31. But the new fund although again, it is slightly longer dated, it has intermediate staging posts, which we have to hit in March 26. So we've really got to crack on with this. Part of the exercise has been to take out schemes from the pipeline which have stalled for various reasons and appear to be permanently stalled, that have been sort of existing in a sort of half-life, and also to be much clearer with applicants about what it is we have to achieve to satisfy government, which is housing. We can do occasionally mixed use sites, but the pure industrial sites, of course, are not something DLUC want us to do. And every time we do one, we move the intervention rate against ourselves, if you see what I mean. So we've had to be very selective and quite tough about this, but there will be a forthright marketing campaign, and Andy Street is very tied into that.
Excellent. Any points, Mike?
Just briefly, Chairman, again, colleague knowledge of time. Two things. First of all, it's imperative that we, as a combined authority, do not try to override the planning decision that's been made by a local authority. One in the town centre, sorry, the city centre, the planning authority said 10% affordable. We were insisting on 20% affordable. Well, I'm sorry, that is wrong. I know that's been reviewed, Rob, because the 20% affordable was sold to me as a government directive. I understand now that is not true. Some of the sites in the pipeline, as John said, we're never going to come forward, so that we need to reallocate that money, because it's all right having it in. That's not where it's got to stay. We've got to get it out, because if you don't spend it and you don't produce those outputs, government will say, up yours, you didn't do that, we'll have back what you've got left and you're not going to have any more. So the thing is that we've got to be very slick with how we get developers through that process, from application to a decision. I mean, Tamebridge is another one where we've got a massive opportunity there. Bilston Urban Village was last week, which was industrial, but the one in Coventry was 1,500 units. I was pleased to say that, and again, Rob, can I just insist that town centre living is something that I'm very keen on. If you bring people back into town centres, you will regenerate that town centre, and that's exactly what is happening in Coventry.
Yeah, I think that's one of the focuses of the directorate and the team. Certainly, that's what the discussions I've had is getting this pipeline, moving. But it's more important actually because of the way things work. It get improved by the investment board, but you don't start on work the site the next day. There's a lead-in time, and I used to reckon it's 12 months actually from purchase of a site to actually to getting stuff coming out of the, not necessarily getting stuff coming out of the ground, but getting the necessary occupation or whatever. So it's not, we've got the time limits are there, and with the lead-in time, so there's a real urgency with some of these funds to get on with it. It's not helped by the intervention rates. 25, I think, okay, but some of these are much lower, and they're just not big enough, frankly, in some cases to make sites viable. But there we are. Okay, any other comments? If not, that's a helpful update, but the next one's going to be meatier on this subject. So thank you very, very much. I think I've managed to hold just about time. We have the next meeting, which 13th of March, 10 o'clock. And thank you again for bringing this one forward. I think that's all on this agenda. So thank you for your time, and thank you officers and participants for your work. Well done.
Well done.